All right, welcome back to Track Talk. We're going to be doing a co-commentated game of 1830, and Chitty will be joining us once again for some extra expertise. We will be starting the game off in the auction with Masked leading us off in priority, and he will be bidding on the Camden Amboy first. Chatamir going for the Mohawk and Hudson, Stephen Yu joining him, and Turtle rounding us out with the Delaware and Hudson. So all three of the high yield privates have at least one bid on them. The Mohawk and Hudson is contested. Um, Chitty, if you're in this auction and you're masked, are you going to bid on the Champlain and St. Lawrence and just hope for someone to mess up and give you the Camden Amboy for cheap here? Or do you not get greedy and try and bid for something else?
I think I go for it. There's going to be some fighting going on, so I don't mind that bid on Champlain and St. Lawrence.
Okay. I think it would be a huge mistake from the other players to do it, but maybe he tempts them. And he actually just pulls from the Schuylkill. So that was something I didn't ask you, but I guess it's also kind of achieving the same thing, maybe even a little bit safer than bidding on the Champlain and St. Lawrence since it's a cheaper private. I think I like that. Let's see if Chatamir is going to take the Champlain here. He instead joins on the Camden and Amboy, which I think means that Stephen Yu is unlikely to pull. I mean, getting the D&H for just 75 seems really strong. I don't know. I think Stephen Yu would probably want to join on the D&H, but it's very undesirable, at least in my opinion, to be on the D&H and the M&H. They're two pretty expensive privates, and you don't usually want to win them both. So he does join on the D&H. So we have contested auctions on all these privates now. Turtle, he may not want to just take the Champlain and St. Lawrence. He will be forced to take the D&H or try and take the D&H, um, but that may leave him vulnerable to ending up with the B&O if he's unable to win the D&H. So we'll see. Not a clear cut decision, and he just buys it. So looking at the auction, Stephen Yu's on both of these privates. I've talked about this before on the channel. I think when you're on two privates like this, you want to um, bid up the D&H a little bit, but you definitely don't want to risk going high because then you run the risk of getting both these privates. And bidding up the D&H and winning it makes it very hard to price and force safely on the M&H. So I think we'll see a little bit of a contest for this, but Turtle may very well be able to secure this. They're bidding it up. Turtle bids for 98 for some reason. May have done the math and determined that he would prevent Stephen Yu from parring or buying an extra share with this. I haven't actually mathed that out. Unusual to see a non-multiple of 5 in the auction, though. Stephen staying right with him, and Stephen Yu wins. So this is the little bit of a dangerous situation that I was talking about. Stephen needs to be very careful, I think, not to come away with the Mohawk and Hudson here. Um, would you have gone that high?
Yeah, I mean, my general rule of thumb is I try not to go certainly more than 50% of the value of the company. Your return when buying in the company, and even with the revenue, gets pretty low at that point. So for me, I probably would have let him have it, knowing, especially for Stephen Yu, he knows he has another private that he can bid on.
Yeah, I think 50% is a probably generous heuristic. I think there's a lot of privates that I wouldn't be willing to go that high for, um, but certainly in some cases you could consider going that high. Mohawk and Hudson now. Chatamir is in a similar position now that Stephen Yu was in on the last time, where he's going to be forced to compete for two expensive privates and may not be able to price and force for the Camden Amboy as a result. If the masked player gets a cheap Camden and Amboy, um, who will have priority? Turtle may potentially have the least private revenue, and if that occurs, Mass Superstar could end up with priority into the next stock round and just be able to take the PRR right off the bat, which is undesirable. So we'll see them bidding, and they're going up to 150. I think that even up to 170, maybe a little bit higher, is still pretty reasonable for this private. Um, and it ends up going for 160. Steven takes it. So he did end up with the DNH and the MNH. He didn't pay max value that I would consider reasonable for either of these privates, but still, it's an expensive combination. He's not going to be able to float unless he gets the PRR. He does have just $2 above the 335 threshold for that. So now we'll see a contested auction for the Camden and Amboy, and whoever loses this auction should be ending up with the B&O, so Turtle should be safe. I'm just going to detour for a second and look at priority. If Masked wins, Chatamir has to buy it, buy the B&O. That doesn't mean that Masked will have priority for the PRR, so that's safe. And then if Chatamir wins, Masked has to buy the B&O, which will give Chatamir priority with the PRR, with the Camden and Amboy. So the table is probably really hoping that Chatamir doesn't win the Camden and Amboy here. And they will bid it up to 200 already, going up to 230.
Oof.
And it goes for 240 to Masked. Chatamir buying the B&O, and he floats it for 100. Stephen Yu, he can take the PRR himself and will be forced to if he wants to float. So that worked out pretty well for him, actually. He takes the PRR, bad news for Mast. Turtle, taking the C&O. C&O is an excellent starting company, of course. Mast is going to be sitting on his share of the PRR. Could sell it the next stock round if he wants, but not going to be able to float this turn. Passing, Chatamir probably also passing, instead buying a C&O share. So it looks like we'll see a two company start. A little bit of a slow start to the game. Steven continuing to float. Turtle also floating. And Chatamir is continuing to invest in the C&O. So it looks like he's not dividing his money up. Instead, he is focusing on the C&O. C&O does have a lot higher revenue in the first couple stock rounds than the PRR, just because the C&O can run to Chicago for 70 and the PRR is going to be limited with 30 or maybe 40. Turtle is now floated, and this potentially gives him priority if Stephen Yu buys less PRR and everybody else just passes. So we'll see if that's going to happen here. Instead, he's continuing to invest, and Chatamir staying right with him. So the C&O is going to be a split presidency. It also means that the C&O will float up and operate before the PRR potentially. Interesting. So Turtle just let him buy up 50%. He could have bought a 6 share there. Um, Do you think this means he's looking to dump this company?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I see someone buy in this much, they're both incentivized. They'll make money despite not running trains on the first round. So, um, yeah, I mean, for me, I would certainly think about laying some crummy track and dumping it.
Yeah. So let's game theory that for a second. Turtle, at the most he's going to be able to do is buy 4 trains and lay an $80 track. So it's not going to be the worst. Actually, he can't even lay an $80 track in the first round. Um, so he's going to exhaust the presidency of at max $320, leaving 350 behind. And then he could dump it, but it'll be all the way down in yellow. So Chatamir might be able to pick up a share or two. Um, and then if Turtle dumps, he'll take the B&O probably, because all of Chatamir's liquidity is going to be tied up in the C&O. He won't be able to defend. So I think that's a win for Turtle if he dumps there. I mean, you'd like to exhaust the Treasury a little bit more than he could, but still a net win for him. The danger is that because he's operating ahead of the PRR, he's going to allow Stephen Yu to very easily buy in his privates, and he might be able to just run away with the game with an early private buy-in. So we'll see how this plays out. But Chatamir has put the game in a very tense situation right at the start here. And let's just make sure priority works out. Yeah, so this is a very dumpable C&O right now. He could also lay tragic track and not head over to Chicago so that if he dumps this company, Turtle would be stuck running just a single 2 train in the next operating round. For instance, if he lays a gentle curve here instead of laying towards Chicago or straight into Akron. So, what do you think? Does that make it less likely that he's dumping? Because he gives him a
Yeah,
win?
I think for sure. I would have laid the gentle turf the other way.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so, which as we were talking about, I don't think it's a little bit of a wash. It definitely would hurt to dump it, but it also hurts him because he's behind. And I mean, I like to see it early for the funds.
Yeah. And the other thing is, let's say he dumps the C&O. Now he's running the B&O. He's going to be one track behind the PRR in the race to Lancaster. So there's no guarantee that he would be able to really get into Lancaster. Because PR is going to lay here, and then in the next operating round, B&O lays here, PR lays this. Um, so maybe not entirely safe jumping over to the B&O.
Yeah.
PRR laying as expected probably just buys a single two train, and we'll see if anybody wants to try and par another company now. If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Mast. He's going to sell the PRR once and then float his company for, you know, just 67 probably. Stevens passing Turtle, also passing Mast. He does sell. So PRR, Stevens happy. He's still operating last in terms of operating order. And Mast is going to float. Oh, actually, he's taking the B&O. So someone is taking the B&O, but because it's not Turtle, Shadomir can sell out of the C&O shares to look to defend. He should still have the liquidity to do that. I mean, he has over $300 in C&O shares alone, so he can buy 5 shares, no problem. But he did lose a little bit of net worth. Actually, he didn't because the C&O fell back, but it also floated up, so it's still valued at 67. So he didn't lose anything by buying these shares, but if he sells out to defend the B&O, he will be giving Turtle a bunch of yellow shares in the market. So Turtle probably not upset if that were to occur. And Shadomir instead going to buy a PRR, so maybe he doesn't care to defend the B&O. I don't know. I mean, if you're the B&O private owner, I think you'd prefer to end up with the B&O than have someone else run it for you. It's a very healthy treasury, and it's going to be rusting your private either way. What do you think?
Yeah, I would have defended there. I mean, having that par price of 100 is a lot of funds to last through an entire game. So I think defending it makes more sense than buying a share, even though the PRR will be paying out, some slight amount this next turn.
Yeah, but it's only, $30. A
Right. Yeah, no, I agree.
little
I
bit
think you defend the
surprised.
BN.
I mean, it's not ideal to be, floating the B&O so early for Chatham, but I think it's less ideal to lose the presidency. All right. Turtle
Agreed.
passing Mast, continuing to pressure. So this is Shadamir's last opportunity to defend. And looks like so he just dumps out of the B&O. Hmm. All right. So he's going to be just maxing out investing and paying shares. He needs to be a little bit careful that Turtle doesn't buy one of these PRR shares because then he's going to be limited in the number of shares he can buy. And Turtle is buying one of the market shares of the B&O, getting a discount. He could actually buy both of those if he wanted. Mast continue to float. This is leaving Chatham to buy up a bunch of these PRR shares. And Turtle's passing. I don't know. So if you're Turtle, I think you buy that PRR share, right? You lose $4 for it, but you prevent Chatham from getting it. And then you float the PRR up. It's still operating after you, though. So maybe not the most important thing to do. B&O's floated. And will Shadomir just take priority here? Looks like he's passing. So he's safe because he has priority. He's not going to be dumpable by any of these players. So he's probably hoping that they all pay out um, in that threes break here so he can just sell out and then start his own company. So I've talked about this ad nauseum on the channel, but the B&O start here, you need to be careful that you don't lose out on Lancaster. So I think I like a sharp turn towards Lancaster here rather than running down to Washington. But I see a lot of players run down to Washington and hope for early game revenue with a couple of two trains, which is what we'll be seeing here. I don't know. Have you seen this before? Has it worked out?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on what the PR player does. I think a lot of people get stuck in the bottom, and then you're playing the rest of the game, trying to get out of that corner as a DNO. So I like your thoughts. I like an early Lancaster
Yeah.
bid.
And I mean, it's not even like it's PRR going out of its way to hurt you, right? Because they lay yellow on Lancaster, then they have to upgrade to green, and they have either a K, which they can direct north to get into Reading and Allentown, or they have the X, which they'll also direct towards Reading and Allentown. Either of those tiles, they're going to be laying it for access to this tile. So either one of those blocks the B&O in green. And then the B&O is forced to upgrade its home and try and get a link on this yellow tile into Lancaster with a sharp curve, um, which is also very blockable. And then by the time all that track lays, you got to worry about the C&O running in from the west and stealing your token. So I think this tile loses you too much tempo, um, and may be very problematic for you later in the game. We'll see how many two trains he buys. If he buys just one, the other players can't buy in their privates. If he buys more than one, which I think he's probably looking to do with this Washington lay, the other players have an easy time to buy their privates. So he buys one, buys two. So now CNO is in a little bit of rough space because there are two trains left. And if he buys both of them in the three, he'll have exhausted most of his treasury, but will be able to potentially buy in his private. Um, which is not a very high value private. But if he doesn't buy any of those trains, he has to worry that Stephen Yu will do it and then be able to buy in his privates, which will put him ahead of the rest of the players. That said, CNO has a pretty weak private to buy in, so probably not super motivated to push through all these trains to buy it in. And then if he forces Steven to buy all these trains, his treasury is going to be limited. I don't know that he has enough money to buy in all these trains and then also his privates for full value. I haven't done the math there, but it's probably pretty tight. So we'll see.
Yeah, I
Running,
don't think you push at CNO at this point.
you don't think so? Okay. Yeah. And he's withholding because he's anticipating Chatamir having to sell out, and he's going to be further in the yellow when he does. He maintains 100% of this revenue rather than splitting it 50-50. So this is a pretty common response to having a parasite, like a 50 or 40, 60-40 split of your presidency, which is bad news for Chatamir because his private rusted and he has no revenue from this company now. PRR laying to Lancaster and immediately tokening. He withholds as well. So this is going to be a slow game. They're all just kind of sandbagging, waiting for someone else to buy into the green. Chatamir, he does have cash for paying shares. Could snap up a B&O share, probably be paying pretty well. Um, Probably doesn't want to buy the PRR share. It's going to be kind of expensive to do it, and he's already demonstrated that he's looking to withhold. Works out nicely for Chatamir. He has priority, and he's going to be able to buy the best shares as a result. Um, so he sells out. Okay. Well, that doesn't work out too well for him then. I think Turtle is fine with this. He can buy two of these cheap shares. And then Chatamir has to look for another company to float. Which company would you be looking at here? I think I'd be looking at the NYNH, but do you have a preference?
Yeah, the four left. I mean, I think that NYNH is situated best for both short-term funds and long-term longevity.
Yeah,
That's usually my go-to after these first three.
I have a soft spot for the NYC, but it's dangerous to float it when the NYNH is still there because it can lay bad track for you. So does he sell the PRR as well? Um, he doesn't need it. He could float for 67 without it, but maybe he's looking for a higher float. So he just sells one of the PRRs, and he's now buying the B&O from the market. Maybe just looking to trash it and then take a NYNH par. Um, we'll see. Or maybe he just holds on to the B&O, expecting it to pay out and understanding that these other players are just going to withhold while he's in the companies. I'm not sure. He has options, a lot of options. If you're Stephen Yu, do you look for the CNO or the PRR here?
I think I go for the CNO.
Yeah, it has higher revenue.
Higher revenue, cheaper for to just get shares in, probably paying out going forward with especially with a lot of market shares.
Yeah. On the other hand, if I'm Turtle, I think I buy the PRR here and then my own CNO. Actually, probably not. You run the risk of being dumped on if you buy that second PRR. So I would just buy my two CNO. I love having market shares, but not risk the worth of the PRR. Not worth the risk of the PRR.
Yeah.
Turtle. He does buy his own CNO. Mast probably buying the CNO as well. He does. Chatamir, is he going to float the NYNH here? He does. So he's just going to sit on that B&O share. He wants to have at least a little bit of revenue trickling in. Turtle, he buys another CNO, and nobody else can buy any shares. So I think we'll just be seeing Chatamir floating and Stephen Yu leaving with priority. Huh, what just happened there? Turtle sold the PRR and bought another CNO. I don't like that play for one reason. Um, you're trying to stay yellow and you're just floating your company up now. So you're going to have to withhold additionally in the future to undo, buying that share. And the difference in revenue between the PRR and the CNO is going to be kind of minimal now um, that the PRR has a token in Lancaster. He also wasn't able to manipulate turn order. So I think that if he's the CNO player, he wants to operate after the PRR, not before it. So if he was going to sell shares, um, he probably wants to make sure the CNO is operating afterwards. NYNH is continuing to float, and we'll just see them pass into the next operating round. So Stephen Yu has priority as expected. B&O operating before the NYNH. So now I think this is even more the scenario that I was talking about before, where you're the lead player in operating order. You're really scared that the other players are going to buy into green and buy their privates out before you're able to. Masked, he's the CNA player. He really wants to buy in his private. So he may have to, he can't. He has two trains already. He's stuck. That's bad news for him. So and now, if he lays the gentle curve or the sharp curve to Lancaster, that's an $80 track that may get him nothing. So I think he has to kind of upgrade his home here. What do you think? Get a Y extension towards this yellow tile. Actually, it's not green. He can't do
Yeah.
anything. Sorry, it's not
Yeah.
green. He
No,
can't
I think
upgrade
he's gonna. Yeah, he either. I think he has to give up on the Lancaster tile and start heading for the Infinity Square.
the Philadelphia and Trenton. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe he just lays a straight to get another run because he has two trains. So not going to give himself a run. He has to token Washington run both of his trains, which I think is a even worse mistake than laying that tile to begin with. Oh, all right. So he's running for 100, and he pays that out. Chatamir's happy that he bought that B&O share. It's going to be his only income this operating round. NYNH has a decision to run to the east towards the B&M or run north towards NYC. Um, Chatamir is going last in priority. So he gets to make this decision, but he has basically no way to guarantee he's going to be the president of that company once it starts. So I don't know. What are your thoughts? Do you help out the NYC or the B&M here?
Yeah. I mean, I think I, I tend to try to go towards the center since you're gonna have some high revenue areas. I think if you have no control over either company, I tend to head towards the NYC, just thinking about long term. But there's obviously a lot of soft factors I think that help make that decision.
Yeah,
Do you have a preference?
I think I usually head towards the NYC. You can run some good trains early in the game with a token on Providence, but your late game potential is pretty limited, I think. Your best run is probably going to be with a five train from Boston to New York if you lay that tile and token. So probably on the same page as you heading towards the NYC, but he disagrees and he's going to be buying into greens. He does not actually have a private, so I'm surprised that he's opening up greens for these other players. He's cut his treasury in half. He is going to be able to lay in token Providence and run all three trains next next operating round, but you're helping the other players a ton. He actually buys two three trains. That's very aggressive. I don't know. I think that kind of thing opens up the possibility for a bankruptcy. He's going to be train locked at the fives. He's already depleted his entire treasury, and he has no private income at all. Hmm.
Yeah,
Cino,
that's an
yeah, that seems aggressive. Cino probably laying Akron here, and he actually withholds. That's a little bit surprising. So he has 80% of the company and is withholding. Again, he had to withhold because he floated up out of Brown. I don't know. I think you got to pay that. But he'll at least be able to buy in his privates. Buys a three so it doesn't fall back, and he buys. Wow, a lot of players are playing very aggressively. So Stephen Yu missed out on the threes. That's bad news for him. Um, but he can still buy in his privates and then float another company to rescue himself if he wants. These trains are really moving fast. C&O did not buy in his private. It's only $80 worth of cash, but with a bunch of cheap shares out there, I'm surprised. So PRR can't upgrade Lancaster here and does. That's going to mean that the B&O is going to be able to lay the Philadelphia tile if the PRR buys in his private, which I expect we'll see. Actually, sorry. Uh, the CNA player is the B&O player, so he has that track lay guaranteed. I thought it was the PRR player, but it was not. And he does buy the four, probably only able to buy in one of his privates as a result. He buys in the more expensive one at least. Wow, so I didn't see that coming. That was a very fast stock round. After a little stall in the first one, they just zip right through those three trains. What is the C&O player going to do with all three trains? He can't even run them for the first operating round. Hmm. I don't know. Do you think this is going to be a bankruptcy game? I get scared when I see all these three trains coming out like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think someone, whether or not it's bankrupt, someone is definitely going to get stuck by it. Using their own funds to buy some permanent change or four trains.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I really do. It very well might be the Cino player.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to have to discard one of these three trains probably. Um, I don't see him floating a second company for a long, long time to buy one of them and shuffle them. All right. Well, stock round four, Steven has most cash. He can sell C&O and float um, another company. He may actually just want to sell one of his PRRs or just sell out of the PRR entirely. He's probably not worried about losing the presidency. And yeah, I think that's what I would do. Just dump the PRR. You can't dump it, but you can put three shares on the market, which is what he does. Brown shares are attractive, but when you're the C&O player and you have, actually, when you're the NYNH player and you already have two three trains with only $150, I don't know if you can risk ending up with the PRR as well. So he's going to float, and I assume he takes the B&M here, just because the B&M is more viable than the NYC at this point. I suppose you could take the NYC and hope that you are able to get into New York. Wouldn't be the end of the world, probably. So he also sells out of the C&O. He puts a lot of shares into Brown, and he does take the B&M for 90. Turtle, um, well, he only has enough cash for some of these Brown shares. I assume he's going to take his own C&O based on how he acted last time. And he sells the B&O. Oh, it looks like he's going to take the PRR presidency. He can buy four of these shares. That's very aggressive. He's going to have to do a lot of withholding. But he's going to have a ton of shares. So if he can survive the train rush, he may be in a good position. That's very dangerous. All right, Mass
Yeah,
Super.
wow, he has 12 shares all brown. Uh, three trains and a four train that he can't. I mean, the nice thing is he can shuffle the threes now, but still, that's rough.
Yeah. He's going to have to do a ton of withholding, which I guess isn't the end of the world at the start because he can withhold and then buy in his $80 private for some revenue at least. But he's going to have to withhold for like probably 3 operating rounds at least to make sure he doesn't go bankrupt. I don't know if the other player is going to give him the time he needs. Chatamir, he can buy up 1 brown share and he picks the CNO, so that'll be floating up. Stephen Yu going to continue to float, and everybody else doesn't have money for shares, so I think it's going to be a boring stock round from here. He actually sells out of the PRR, so I guess he was worried about this being dumped on him eventually because Turtle is going to have priority in the next stock round if Stephen Yu buys here. So any of these, investing in either of these companies is potentially dangerous. And Stephen sells another 2 shares of the PRR, so he's safe. So none of these companies are dumpable, and unfortunately, Turtle has no cash to buy any of these brown shares back. But if he withholds down twice, he'll end up with a $10 share, and if he buys in his private, he'll be able to snap them all up. So I don't know. It's he's on a razor's edge here. This is very dangerous. He might be able to pull it off. I don't know, but it's definitely high risk, high reward. And I think we can just skip through the rest of the stock round now. Steven should be just floating, I think. And he buys a paying share of the NYNH, leaving Turtle with priority. Okay. So if I'm playing the B&M here, I upgrade my home tile. I don't lay Providence because I think the NYNH player is running 2 3 trains. So he's going to be very heavily incentivized to lay in token Providence for you. Do you agree with that, or would you be laying Providence?
Yeah, no, I think the chances that he plays yeah, no, I think it I would upgrade my home tile as well.
Yeah, I mean, the NYH's players' options are to lay Providence or to upgrade New York. Both of them are $80, but only one of them gives him potential to run both his trains. So I think the odds are very high that he lays that. Steven agrees. Can pick up a 3 here. And Bino somehow is trainless. I think we missed that. That's bad news for him. We'll be able to buy in his private and lay Philadelphia if he wants, but it's expensive private, and he's looking at a $300 train, so he's in kind of a rough spot as well. So buying in his privates, good news for him. Gets the Philadelphia track. This is bad news for Turtle on the PRR. He's not going to be able to take advantage of this $40 revenue. Um, Not the end of the world for the entire game necessarily, but definitely not ideal. And he buys a 4. So we got what, 3? We got 4 companies in this game with very little cash, with just 1 4 train before the fives. Um, that is very dangerous. Fortunately, nobody can buy into the 5 during this stock round or this set of stock round or operating rounds. So we'll see a little bit of a stall, but a lot of these players are in very dangerous situations. NYNH, he lays Providence and tokens it, so Stephen Yu is very happy about this, and he's going to be paying for 150 CNO. So he's the president of the PR and the CNO now. That's a great combination to have, very strong. You can lay a lot of synergistic track, but you'd love to have that combination with a little bit more than $190.
Mhm.
And he only is able to run 2 trains, which he withholds, kind of as expected. So all of a sudden he looks a little bit better, right? $300. That's not too far from a permanent train. PRR,
Yeah, yeah.
he links up in Pittsburgh, and he's probably going to buy a train out of the CNO, I have to imagine. Withholding as well. And he actually, yeah, he does buy a train. Okay. So the CNO looks pretty healthy. Turtle owns 80% of it. And the PRR is a little bit of liability, but it does have a 4 train. So it's not going to be, entirely screwed when the 6 comes out. Um, all right, so I'm feeling more optimistic for Turtle now. He can withhold again on one of these companies, probably the PRR, um, and buy in his private with that, and then buy all these shares. So he'll have 8 shares in 2 companies. That's pretty good. B&M, probably upgrading Providence, and he'll just run for 100, which he pays. B&O, I think now you upgrade your home. You're not going to be able to get into Lancaster ever now that the CNO and the PRR player are colluding, um, but it's a little bit more money at least. So he runs for 140 and pays that out. NYNH doesn't have money for track now. So, in retrospect, starting the NYC would have been pretty valuable. You could have raced down to Reading and Allentown probably, or get into New York rather than starting the B&M. It's hard to predict that kind of thing, I guess. Pays for 170. Turtle. I think he has to keep withholding, right? If he pays here, he'll be in orange, so he won't have to sell shares, but he desperately needs cash. I think he has to withhold again. Maybe he withholds and buys in his private. Okay, so this is nice for him. He links up Baltimore, but then he immediately steals the token. So Baltimore can't run west, or the B&O can't run west, and he's able to take advantage of that $50 city now. Very nice for him. He pays for 160, and the PRR probably laying Reading and Allentown now. He does. And I think he probably withholds again here. Nice. Buys in his private. So he's looking good. He's got a bunch of cash. He can buy up 4 shares and then just start, investing in other players' companies. Keep his companies in the brown. I think he's in good shape. I was very nervous, but maybe unwarranted. The only downside is he's not going to be able to float another company for a while, I don't think. And he probably will miss out on it. Mast. So he could sell a share and then look to float for a pretty minimal par. But staring at 5 trains or 1 train away from 5 trains, I think you want a higher par than just for 67. Um, I don't know. Do you think any of the other players are looking at these companies? Or is he safe to just wait for the next stock round?
I think he's safe. I mean, I think um, the hard part is like if he sits on this cash and tries to. I mean, if he does invest these cash in other shares, he'll probably won't have priority for the next, and won't have pick of the next set of companies in the next stock round. But I don't. I see people investing and not parring another company this turn.
Yeah, that's a good point. Turtle is unlikely to go last because he has the least cash, which means that Mass Superstar is least likely to go first. So if he doesn't reserve a presidency here, he may be unable to get the one he wants. Um, I think you'd much prefer the NYC over these other 2 companies, unless you can guarantee that the CPR will be a suitcase. But unfortunately, Turtle controls that private, and he's actually already laid it track, so not going to be a valuable company. So he'll buy a paying share, Chatham, buying a B&M. Stephen Yu, probably only 1 share for him this round, and buys the B&O. Turtle, he's actually able to continue buying shares. He's looking great. He's got like double the shares of everybody else. He's going to have to withhold, of course, but still, he has great companies, great map position, and he's going to have a ton of shares for the late game. Mast, he bought and then sold the NYNH. I don't think it's worth trashing shares just for a $2 or $4 bonus. And it looks like he's selling out now, so he is going to float a company. All right. Takes the NYC for max. So he's going to push into the fives probably. Um, Stephen Yu's a fan of that. He's going to be able to pick up a 5. And honestly, Turtle looks like he's going to be able to pick up a 5 too. So I don't know if this is advisable. Chatamir, he's buying a B&M again. Steven's passing. Turtle jumping on the B&M train. Mast continuing to float, and it looks like Chatamir is going to have priority into the next stock round. And Mast sells one of his shares. So this means he'll operate behind the B&M. So if Mask buys the 4 and the 5, um, the B&M still will end up with a 5, but it will be an operating round 2, so he won't be able to run it this set of operating rounds. And he buys a B&M, which will float it up even further. All right, we'll see how this works out. B&M, well, he could upgrade New York, but he's not going to be able to reach it without a token. So maybe he just waits and just runs his train here. Looks like that's the case. Pays out for 100. NYC. So he's going to be the player to eventually upgrade New York, probably. And he buys into the 5s. This does hurt Turtle, who has to discard a train, but he's going to end up with a cheap permanent. So he's looking pretty good. BC's guaranteed to get a 5 now. So he just needs to withhold on the PRR for, I guess he's going to have to withhold for a D because he's going to be train locked. So he's probably not going to end up with a 6. NYNH, he's upgrading Boston. He's able to run that, and he's paying for 200. B&O, he now has Brown. So that's one thing we neglected to mention is that by opening up Brown with this operating order, he's able to secure that Philadelphia and Trenton token or tile. Um, he probably is obligated to token here because if he doesn't, the PRR C&O can drop a token here and block him out. That's painful. He doesn't have cash. He needs cash for permanent trains. Would you drop the token proactively, or would you wait?
Um, yeah, I think he's in a tight spot. I think I would drop it because otherwise you can just be locked so easily with the CNO and the PRR. They have so many tokens and so many tile lays that I worry he would get boxed in without that token.
Yeah, I think if he
I
doesn't
think you
drop
lay.
that, he runs the risk of being laid track here that will prevent him from ever running west and then being tokened out of New York, which will, really cripple his runs for the rest of the game. So I think you're right. I think he has to drop it, but he really doesn't want to, I'm sure. So he does, and he's paying for 170, which he pays. CNO probably upgrades New York here, be my guess. Instead, upgrading Lancaster. Okay. And he pays for, he's actually withholding. Okay, so he wants to stay orange so he doesn't have to sell shares. And he knows he's going to need the money eventually, so not unreasonable. He'll buy a 5 here. And the PRR, he has room to withhold, or he has room to pay. He's at $10, so he could pay twice and then still stay in the brown. But he needs money, so he might need to withhold as well. Upgrades New York, can run his 4 and a 3 for a pretty good run now. And 250, which he pays. But
Wait,
imagine that. What's that?
oh, I'm just thinking about why did the BNO token in but why didn't he token in New York? Why did he lay a token in
Well, New
Philadelphia and
York,
Trenton when he could just
New York is going to open up to 2 holes. So if he tokens in New York, they can open it up in brown to 2 holes, and then they'll just token behind him in Philadelphia and cut his run in half. So
Oh, you're right. Okay.
this token guarantees him access to New York. It's the better token.
Gotcha.
B&M, he upgrades New York. See, it just opened up, and
There
then
you go. Yeah, yeah.
he's going to grab the token in New York now, which is going to hurt the NYC player. He runs for 180, which he pays. NYC, he's at least running a train, but it's going to take him a long time to develop routes. He's going to have to get all the way over to Rochester and hopefully into Hamilton before he can start making any real money. He's paying for 100. NYNH, running 2 trains. Can't upgrade Providence. Well, may look to upgrade Albany, even though he's probably not running that track, just to lay Tragic Track for the NYC so it can't lay an X and get over to Rochester faster. If he forces him to run out this edge, it'll slow him down a little bit. Okay. Albany can upgrade to Brown to get access here and may do that, but it does still slow him down at least one track. NYH is running for 230 and he pays. B&O running 2-4 trains. He must have shuffled trains. I didn't realize. So we missed this. He bought the 4 train out of the NYC last turn. So he's going to have a pretty good run, but he only owns 20% of the company. Um, so even an excellent run is not going to put him ahead. Upgrading his home, and he pays for 390. Casino. So he's going to hit Philadelphia twice, it looks like, with his intersecting tract here. And he's got 350. So it's not going to be long at all for him to bring out the D train. He has great runs. He's train locked right now, but as soon as another company floats, the 6 will come out and he'll be set. He pays out again. And PRR, he withholds this time. So Chatham leads in priority. Turtle is share leader, just behind in net worth and has the most cash. He is totally rehabilitated these 2 companies. He's in a great position. Um, Chatham has enough money to float. Probably will take the Erie, and that may be why he was laying bad track for the NYC because he wants the Erie to end up with the token in Rochester, not the NYC. So I expect we'll see him sell a share and float for 600 or for 1,000. And he does. Stephen Yu probably just buying paying shares. He's selling out of the B&O and actually sells out of the NYH too. He probably assumes that these companies are going to have to withhold, so wants to put his money somewhere else. Does he take the CPR? I think he's telegraphing that he is. He does. All right.
Yep.
CPR is going to be a little bit rough. Maybe he thinks that he can lay this $120 track and then get into Albany for access to New York. I don't know. Turtle, ton of cash, and he's just going to invest in companies with permanent trains probably. Mast, he's buying his cheap B&O now that it's been sold down. And we'll see Stephen and Chatham continue to float. Turtle buying some cheap B&O. I'm going to move kind of quickly through this stock round. Turtle is just continuing to buy paying shares and companies with permanent trains. And we see a little deviation from the plan here. Chatham has bought a share of the CPR, so he's looking to sell this down, I guess, because he's not going to be able to float the Erie without selling a share. If he sells this down, it doesn't change operating order, but I guess he's worried that Stephen Yu would potentially try to buy some Erie shares and operate before him to pick up the first 6. I'm not entirely sure why he's doing this. He buys 2 shares of the CPR, so probably sells out here. He's going to sit on it. And Stephen Yu's going to return the favor by cross-investing in the Erie. And he sells that down. I'm not sure what Chatamir's accomplishing with this. Turtle's going to buy up that sold Erie share and then immediately sell it down again, probably. So he's trashing the Erie behind the CPR, but Chatham can sell the CPR once more. So he sells an NYH, and he's just really trashing shares here. I guess maybe they're worried that there's going to be a bankruptcy, and Chatham and these other players are trying to position themselves so that they're number 1 in net worth if someone goes bankrupt. I'm struggling to explain this otherwise. But maybe that's what's going on. I don't think we're going to see a bankruptcy though.
No, I don't think so.
Stephen buys a paying share of the NYC. Turtle also buying the NYC. And Chatham could buy his last share of the Erie here, which he does. So we'll see if the other players are willing to surrender priority for one more share. Turtle's got so many shares. I think I would just pass here, sit on the $130. You're going to need that money to buy a permanent train in a little bit, anyways, probably. But he buys the NYC. Does Chatamir just want to sit on his $200? No. So Turtle played that right. He didn't lose priority by doing that. And that will leave Stephen Yu with priority. So the ultimate operating order is going to be the Erie before the CPR. So Erie is going to get the first six. And Erie doesn't have any track laid for himself. So he could buy the six and not actually have to run any tracks. He could buy that six into his other company, which would be the NYH, until someone lays track for him. B&M laying track for his CPR, so we will see him rushing down to New York, it looks like. And he's paying for 300. NYC, he actually lays the $120 track into Providence. That's a little bit better for his run because now he can hit Boston and New York. But this is the player with the two fours in the B&O. He's going to be looking at a D train probably. I don't know if he can afford to spend that $120. And he tokens in Providence. Wow. So it doesn't hurt the NYNH, obviously, but it really doesn't hurt the B&M either. B&M is able to bypass Providence with this $120 track you just laid. I don't know. Yeah.
Hmm.
He's spent $160 now that he desperately needs for the D train to quote unquote hurt the B&M, but he actually hasn't hurt the B&M at all. The B&M actually probably loves this. He can bypass these dits that he was otherwise going to be running.
Yeah, I think I don't. Yeah, that it's an easy upgrade to get into. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what his thoughts were.
I guess I don't think he's thinking this, but I guess the one argument for that type of play is that by tokening in Providence, you're making it less likely that CPR tokens in Albany because then he'll be cutting his other company, the B&M, in half. So you could leave a opening in Albany by this type of play. But if you already have a token in Albany, do you care if it stays open or not? You probably don't, right? So I don't know. He's withholding now, recognizes he's in a little bit of danger. And do we see the first six come out here? So with this type of lay, you could be setting yourself up for the suitcase and hoping that nobody lays you track, or if they do lay you track, they have to lay helpful track for you. Um, Alternatively, you could just be hoping to get to Hamilton, Toronto as soon as possible. So he's shuffling trains from the NYNH. NYNH does not have six train money just yet, and he's actually leaving himself $120 in addition to the six train cost. So that tells the other players that he is looking to run the Erie because he needs the $120 to lay Hamilton and then token. Otherwise, he would have put more money into the NYNH to emergency buy both sixes. B&O running just a four train. He could withhold for a six here, which would be bad news for Chatamir, who has to emergency buy a D then. Well, to be fair, he wouldn't have to emergency buy. He could shuffle the train out of the Erie and delay the game a little bit that way. So does he withhold? He does. So he'll see the second six come out. He's just shy of upgrading for the D, which is a little bit unfortunate for him. He's used all of his tokens, but he was able to secure himself a run west into Pittsburgh. No guarantee that that goes untokened, though, because the PRR and the CNO both have tokens left. And he does buy the six. So Turtle, he's still in good shape. That four train's going to save him. Um, well, actually, no. Not if the NYNH buys the D here. Then Turtle would be in a little bit of trouble. But I think the NYNH has shown that he's going to be buying the six over, which is what he does. CPR, he has two trains, so he's also probably going to be shuffling. Well, actually, he has the upgrade for the D, so the D train should be coming out here. Yeah. All right. So Turtle is going to be out of pocket for a D train probably. Um, But if he withholds on the C&O, which he'll operate first, and then buys the train over with the PRR, he should be able to afford it. I think he's fine. He shouldn't bankrupt. The This is interesting though. So getting the D train upgrade is going to require all of his cash, so he's not actually going to be able to lay this $120 track. Um, the B&M is also $10 short. He's going to have to withhold once for that track, which is kind of painful. Oh, he was able to give the B&M $10, so he's aware of that danger and has left his other company to lay his track for him. Well played. C&O, I think you have to withhold here for your eventual D train in the PRR. PRR is going to have a great D run though. So he withholds, and then I expect we'll see him shuffle um, the train into the PRR to combine his treasuries, which he does. So he'll be out of pocket about $400 for the D train. He's got $120 of shares, and all these companies are going to be paying into him the next stock round or this next operating round. So he should be fine. I don't think he'll even have to sell shares to buy this D train. All right. B&M linking up the CPR as expected. Running for 160. NYC. He needs to start heading over to Rochester, I think. So what is that about? He upgrades a green gentle curve here. I think he's preventing the B&M player.
Blocking.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. You were faster on the uptake than I was. Running for 210. Erie doesn't have a train, so he really doesn't want to lay himself any track right now, I don't think. He would go bankrupt. So Chatamir's, I think, functionally eliminated from this game, unfortunately, um, because he's got $1,000 of liabilities hanging over his head at any single point. Um, Mast has permanent trains, but doesn't really have good runs for them. Turtle, he's going to have to pay $400, but he's probably not going to sell shares to do it, and has one more operating round after this to run his train. So he's going to have a ton of cash into the next stock round. He already is a massive share leader. Stevens running a D train in the CPR, but has terrible track for it. B&M has terrible track as well, and he's trailing in shares by a factor of 2. Um, so we'll play this out into the stock round, but this may be a callable game for Turtle. We don't necessarily have to drag this one out.
Yeah,
B&O
I
paying.
agree. I mean, landing with the, I think going back to the landing with both the PRR and the CO and CNO in Brown ended up being key for him to have those two and be able to shuffle the trains and then run them for so much.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was given a bad hand, but he was able to turn it around very well. He played that well.
Yeah, he did.
NYNH getting another link into Boston. Still hitting 2 dits though. That's not ideal. Running for 220, and he's paying it out. He needs to start withholding if he wants to afford this D train. It's going to be very slow getting there otherwise. CPR, pretty terrible D run. Just 170. CNO, he ended up with 279, so he's going to have to sell 1 or 2 shares, I think, um, to afford this D train. Not the end of the world when you have 12 or 9 shares more than anybody else. Upgrading Columbus, and he sells a B&M, and that gives him enough cash. So he only has to sell 1 share, and is now running a D train in the C&O, which is going to have a pretty good run. Much better run than the CPR, at least. PRR, he runs and pays out. So let's do this last operating round, take stock of the game, and then we will decide whether or not it's callable. B&M, not entirely sure where he's heading with this. I guess he has secured himself a run into Albany, so this blocking attempt was unsuccessful. Running for 220, which he pays. NYC, he is heading over to Rochester finally, but doesn't have money to token. Paying for 220. B&O, he's able to link up with Chicago, so his run's going to be pretty good because he can hit New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore. and Chicago with no dits. Um, and Pittsburgh and Columbus can upgrade a little bit further, or at least one of them can. So this will be his run for the rest of the game until Pittsburgh gets tokened. Um, PRR and the CNO are going to have to withhold to do that. But he may withhold on one or both of these companies at some point to keep them brown. So I think the odds of the B&O being able to run this run for the rest of the game is quite low. But for now, he's running for 310, which he pays. NYNH, not laying any track, and he's still paying out. So inching his way towards a D train, but it's taken a very long time to get there. And he's also just continuously falling back on 5 shares. So he's in last place in this game, I think. CPR, he tokens Albany. So after all that work to bypass this block, he actually blocks the B&M anyways. That's interesting. What does that token get him? Hmm. I guess he can start running from Albany instead of Montreal when the Rochester track starts developing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really see. I mean, he has a D. There's no one else to token there in any foreseeable future, at least for the next round. So I don't think he gains him much currently.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Paying for 180. CNO, first run of his D train, and he's actually allowing himself to run through Cleveland just for a little extra money. Running for 340, which he'll start paying, and upgrading Pittsburgh. He pays that as well. All right, so let's look at this game situation for a second. Turtle, despite having to out of pocket a D train, has the most cash. He is net worth leader by a good margin, massive share lead, great companies, really in no danger of a dump. NYC potentially dumpable, but he has priority on him, and he's always going to have priority on masked unless Turtle takes the very last action of a stock round, which he can pretty easily prevent. So no train liability. Um, sorry, the B&M is also in theory dumpable, and that's a less safe investment for him because Stephen Yu operates right ahead of him. But not going to happen in this stock round for sure. So I think he's safe to just buy paying shares and make sure he doesn't go last in priority. And he can just run his companies with hold, staying brown as needed, and he'll just run away with this game. Do you see any options for the other players?
I agree. I don't think so. I mean, when you have a that kind of share lead with companies in the brown and the current value, like, one of the difficulties is often, like those shares are worth so little. But yeah, I mean, he's come out ahead. He got enough money out of them that there's just no, and he has enough other shares that I don't see a path to victory unless Turtle makes a real bad decision.
Yeah. And I'll just say to your point about the shares being worth a little, yeah, like their value in absolute terms is little, but their appreciation down here in the left of the market is actually 10 per share, which is you got to get all the way over here basically to see that in the other area of the market. So he's appreciating, just as good as these other players, if not more. This is only a $5 jump, but this is 10. Um, so he's in good shape. I think with that
Yeah,
said,
no, I agree with that. It was more that like if he the fact that he already has the value is already winning in total value means I mean that they needed to break his monopoly there before that.
yeah, I see your point. All right. Well, in that case, if we're both agreed, I think we can skip the rest of this game and just go to the end to confirm.
Sure.
So he wins by a landslide. He's $4,000 ahead of everyone. All right. So, I mean, we don't have to talk really much about the track. It looks like the Erie eventually did get some track laid for it. And I assume he was running a D train in that company. He was. Looks like there was no dumps. Um, the other players, so he withheld so much to stay brown that he was able to afford a second D train actually. And it looks like somehow Masked also ended up with an extra permanent train. Okay, well, Turtle runs away with this in a landslide, and this all goes back to stock round 2 or 3, where he was dumped on, and the players weren't able to push trains fast enough to punish him for buying all those brown shares. Very risky strategy, but like we said, high risk, high reward. He ends up with 50% over the next closest player's net worth. Very well played. This was Track Talk with Chitty, so thank you for listening, and we'll be back with more commentary in the future.